Welcome to Smokin Bulls, the podcast about business, money, and lifestyle. We're here today with Adnan Brkic to talk to him about his podcast about disruptive technologies. I'm Tyler.
I'm Dave.
Let's get into it. All right, welcome Adnan to the Smokin Bulls podcast. Thanks very much for joining us.
Definitely. Hi guys, how are you?
We're doing great. We're laid back. We're enjoying a nice afternoon here with a few different guests. So we've got you on today to chat a bit about a podcast that you've been working on. As I understand it, it's a bit about disruptive technologies. Maybe you can share a bit with us about what that means in more detail so I don't butcher it.
Yeah, definitely. So the podcast is called Digital Embrace. And how that came about is my colleague and I, my co-host Jesse Smith, we're both very interested in technology and how it's changing and how it's changing much quicker than most anticipate. So we're avid readers. We absorb a lot of this. We ended up having a lot of conversations between the two of us. And we figured if you put a mic between us two, if we're just having a casual drink one evening, you can actually record that, edit it, and you know what? Maybe it makes a decent podcast. So that's what we're doing. Perfect. And the Digital Embrace is mixing a little bit of that technology, that disruption, that exponential growth with investing. That's what I do day to day. That's what I love doing. And so we're melding the two and hopefully creating a unique source of knowledge to bridge the gap between what most people know about technology and what most people don't. And that's the really exciting stuff.
Cool. So Digital Embrace is something that you guys have been doing for a while now. Do you have a lot of episodes posted or what's?
We have a few. We have everything established. We haven't released yet because we're looking to get a couple more. But yep. I think next month is when we pull the trigger and actually release most episodes to the wild.
Well, you sound like the way Dave and I got into Smokin Bulls was really similar. I mean, we just wanted to have conversations with unique people in business and learn about them and share them with our client base as well with society in general, whoever seems to click on it. So It's kind of fun. I mean, we're new to it and it sounds like you guys are kind of new to it as well. But when we were developing our podcast, we had reached out to you to get some of your feedback on podcasts. I think one of the funniest things was like, well, what podcasts do you guys watch? Was a question or listen to was one of the questions you asked Dave and I, and we were both like, well, I've never heard or seen a podcast.
It's pretty bad.
So we weren't very used to what the format was like, and maybe that's helped us in developing our podcast. So maybe you could share with us some of the neater conversations that you guys have already had, or maybe upcoming conversations that you're about to have, some technologies that maybe we're not aware of, or maybe our viewers aren't aware of, that were entertaining for you to chat about.
Yeah, most definitely. The entire concept, it was based on the fact that most of us don't understand how quickly technology is evolving. And that's a very broad phase, but different technologies in different spaces. It's reached a point where they're in exponential growth. And what that means is a couple of years from now, they're going to be much, much larger than if they just grew a certain amount per year. The amount they're growing is also growing a certain amount. And what we've figured out is that in the private equity space, let's say Silicon Valley, which a lot of people are familiar with, that's where all the great companies have come out of, Alphabet, the Facebooks of the world, et cetera. Most people are familiar with those names, but that's what we call accepted or older technology, right? Everyone's familiar with it. We use it day to day. We're all plugged into our phones and our computers. We know about it. But what's happening in the private equity space in Silicon Valley, that's where the excitement is. That's where the companies that will be as big as Facebook and Google and Alphabet 5 to 10 years from now are in existence today. And so we're trying to find those gems. And we talk about a lot of this exciting stuff they're doing. So it's still very early stages, but if you look in that private equity space around Silicon Valley, you can find where some of these technologies are emerging from.
Interesting. It'd be very cool to learn about a company like Facebook before it's really off the ground and it's just fledgling, I guess. I've never thought it trying to find those companies. So you're saying that by searching private equity transactions in the Silicon Valley area, that's where you can find where some of that money's flowing and what it's supporting?
That's right. So those companies are in existence today, but a lot of the ones that are doing exciting things are still private. So it's inaccessible to most investors. However, some are public. And so our goal is to educate people around the technologies that are available today. So you start a little early, you kind of dip your toe into what the concepts are so that when they do become public, if they're not public yet, you can jump on it. So you can jump on the Amazons of the world or the Facebooks of the world 15 years ago. And right now you can be telling stories if you did invest back then, how you got you got in at a couple dollars a share when they're trading at over $1,000.
It's still really inaccessible for the most part for the average person. I mean, sometimes even to get on some of the public availability, that would be entering into a private equity fund that gets into those private companies. I mean, you have to have big bucks sometimes. It's hard to get that wedge. I do know one of the funds that we use, which is kind of a go anywhere fund. Mm-hmm. It's allowed to have a 10% private equity sleeve, and they've been dabbling for quite some time and picking up some of those IPOs before they're an IPO. Right. I think that's the only way we've been able to see into that side of it. I mean, we do some private equity work, but it's pools. And it's pools that are accessible more on the retail side because, there is a lot of restrictions on some of those private equity pools that are not even pools, I guess. Just private equity. They might expect you to hang around for 10 years and you can't get your money back and all sorts of stuff. But if it's tech, and it's up and coming stuff, who knows?
You're completely right. It's very difficult to get in that space unless you have a very high net worth and you're already plugged in there. And so our goal is to bridge at least that information gap so that when that opportunity does become available, we can dive in. And a few examples to give you in terms of the technology that we're excited about and that we're going to be talking a lot about. One is genomics. So on the biological side, when I say technology, everyone thinks of computing and communication technology. And there's a lot of exciting stuff going on there, but there's a wholesale lack of knowledge around what's going on the biological side, whether it's printing biological materials and instead of, for example, reconstructive surgery. No longer are you installing plastics or things of that nature. Over the next couple of years, we're starting to see a lot of implementation around natural 3D printed technologies embedded into your body, and then your cells grow into them, and then all of a sudden, it's a natural.
It's one
replacement.
with you. You become one with it.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds kind of like the Matrix. You just plug in to get your upgrades.
At one point in time, maybe. But it's really exciting stuff. And genomics and CRISPR technology where you edit the genome. I mean, we've already seen it with the vaccines, mRNA vaccines. So that kind of stuff, early innings, like I said, but 5 to 10 years from now, much more pronounced, much larger scope, and a lot more people will know about it. We're just trying to educate early, if you will.
Yeah, it reminds us of a podcast we did earlier a couple of months ago on Genomics, which is a genome sequencing company. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard of them, but
I'm familiar.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched our podcast on that, but we interviewed Dr. Nikolai Razik and talked to him about their genomics and gene sequencing and what they can do with that technology.
And how much more they can do.
Pretty fascinating stuff, yeah.
He says just the advancements that, before a few years ago, you try and get a test like that and the hoops you had to go through to get it. Now you're getting the test, but they're also, they've got the whole sequence now. It's looking at what the mistakes or I guess the mutations in your DNA. And then that's, kind of matches up into where you're coming from is there's now pieces they can start creating maybe to fix those, or I'm not sure you can fix a mutated DNA so easily, but you can do something to work within that. So the science of all of those pieces is fascinating.
How to treat abnormalities in the DNA, in the DNA. So his conversation was around how to better treat cancer, how to better treat all sorts of genetic dispositions. So it was a pretty cool conversation, and he talked about it as if, as you're saying, in 5 to 10 years, you have a baby in the hospital, the most common thing they get is a blood test to check all sorts of stuff. You will get your genetics or your genes sequenced at birth, and then that will be part of your public health record, and doctors can treat you based on how your DNA looks. So pretty cool.
Now your kids won't be, not getting married because they're from different families or different religions. Like, well, we looked at the DNA. That's not going to stack well together. Sorry, find someone else.
Yeah, it's really exciting stuff, especially the using CRISPR to edit genomes of adults or kids or whatever it might be. They've cured blindness already. So a couple of months ago, they were able to, if it was a specific disorder that you've had since birth, you can now see again, which, if you put a monetary number on that, if I could tell you that if you've been blind all your life and I can fix that, how much would you pay for that?
Yeah, no kidding.
So the monetary side, that follows with all these groundbreaking discoveries, which is wild.
A lot more money than you'd give me if I lost my vision.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
From my insurance plan, I can say that.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
So cool.
that is fascinating. You're right. Also, I think of when I think of disruptive technology is how my phone has improved over the last 5 to 10 years and how that's changed. But you're talking about technology in all facets. So pretty cool conversations that you guys are having over there.
Yeah, and one that I actually learned about a couple months back is something called GPT-3, which is a version of an artificial intelligence that a private company in Silicon Valley has out right now, and you can kind of work with them and pay for it. And it can read regular text and translate it. It can also listen to your questions. And so think of it as Alexa or Google Home on absolute steroids, where it understands what you're saying. It could read a legal document and then tell you in normal people speak or lay person speak what that legal document means.
Nice.
And for us as podcasters, it could summarize your podcast and put it up. Or if you don't want to read a book, you tell which book to read, and then it'll tell you, in a page what that book's about.
Wow.
Really neat.
Yeah, that's the Cole's notes of everything.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't think we were there with artificial intelligence, but we are.
Well, I think, and maybe you can speak to this more directly, is artificial intelligence and the way it changes is it will change, as you mentioned earlier, exponentially because it builds on itself. So it doesn't require our input so much to make it better. It makes itself better.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the concept of deep learning, where you put the basics of an artificial intelligence, how our brains are wired and how they work. You put that into a simulative environment, and then you simulate that hundreds of thousands or millions of times. And so that call it artificial brain learns an objective, which is still early in its infancy. It's been around for a number of years, but if it's learning and all you have to do to make it smarter is put more horsepower or more computing power behind it. Computer power is getting cheaper year over year. And so that, by definition, if that concept works, is getting better and better, and the AI is getting smarter and smarter year over year, which is phenomenal.
I can't even imagine. I'm trying to imagine pitfalls in my brain here. I'm just thinking like I buy a car and my computer tells me I'm an idiot. That wasn't the one you're supposed to buy. You don't even understand yourself. Just the paranoia of those things. Imagine the ads, like the marketing that will be done to you.
Yeah.
Just because of that. You get those pop-ups all over your screen now. As soon as you search one website, they hunt you down with every blip from that. But imagine the AI way of learning. Obviously it's picking up on us all anyways, just from our searching habits, us talking to, those devices in our home and, just what we type on our phones. They're harvesting all that data. It's anonymous data to a point, but they're learning people's habits. And then I think there's good that can come for sure, making your life easier. But the amount of stuff that they're going to.
It is exciting. And it's interesting to hear about different technologies that are out there and how they're advancing and how quickly they're advancing. But in your guys' conversations, do you ever get into, like Dave was saying, is there pitfalls behind this that you guys can spot or foresee? Like what's what could be the downfall of this? Are we going into Terminator 2 where we've got Skynet and we're all going to get roasted somehow?
Yeah, the Terminator situation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, theoretically, that's definitely possible. I know some popular names or call it celebrities in the industry like Elon Musk have said that's the biggest risk to humanity is the Terminator AI, an all-knowing AI, because if you look at every time humans have discovered I call it a subpar race where we've been more advanced technologically than them, we've wiped them out. What happens when a superior AI comes about? We're the subpar or inferior race in that.
No more football. Well, there'll be a football, but it won't be for nuclear codes. You just turn all the computers off. Hits the button and everything just.
Yeah. How do we get that off button?
You got to have that one off button that overrides every single.
Until AI makes itself smart enough to override the off button.
No,
exactly.
you gotta have it wired so that one off button, no matter what, it's
the big red button.
It's the big red button.
Yeah, somewhere in a bunker.
Somewhere in a bunker. Somewhere in a football. Isn't it mobile? It's got to be mobile.
Yeah,
terrifying. Do you guys do meetings like this in your podcast? Do you have conversations with anybody, or is this more driven between you and your partner? You guys just have conversations with each other?
Yeah, him and I mostly conversing. We do plan on having some guests. We haven't had any yet, but that definitely spices things up, right? When if you get a professional coming in to talk about a niche, because him and I were definitely not professionals on the subject. We're just avid readers and consumers of knowledge. And getting a professional like Mikolai, when you had him on talking about genomics, that's definitely that's a huge amount of insight in a short amount of time.
Yeah,
he was kind of funny. I mean, when you think about technology in the investment, insurance, advisory world, you just think about how easy you can conduct transactions.
Mm-hmm.
But the best part from his was, well, wouldn't you want to know something about yourself before you went and got your critical illness, that the insurance company is not privy to that information? So pretty spectacular type thing. Most people have not connected all those dots together here.
I completely agree. And I think that's unique in certain jurisdictions like Canada, where you can know and they can't know.
The
which
States
is
too, I think. Maybe the States are all individual, but I remember reading something once and it had something to do with all this. This was years ago. I think it was just the 23andMe type tests.
Mm-hmm.
And it was starting to cause problems because, you imagine you and your siblings, you're like, you're not my brother, and next thing you know, you're confronting your parent. And so all these problems were happening, right? And,
I've heard stories.
yeah. There was somebody who had a child and, for 8 years, but the child wasn't his. But yet his spouse had been having an affair with the father. And then he said, well, obviously, I'm not doing this anymore. Moved out. The guy moved in, but he had to pay child support. But yet it was that person's child and he got the DNA.
Really?
So it's just, there's a lot of hazardous things that come with that. So I think that's part of the reason when I was reading that, the state shut down having that information shared to things like your insurance company. And I think the insurance companies are a little worried about it, and they probably should be.
Sure.
But is everybody who thinks they have a pre-existing condition going to go run down and buy a policy because they think they can get ahead of it? I mean, what's the take upon critical illness anyways?
Exactly.
Very low for specific people, So I think there's just people who are going to be interested in knowing stuff, especially when it comes to genetics. And there's going to be people who are like, I don't want to know. Don't tell me anything.
They don't want to know that. That's one thing I've been thinking of. Would you really want to know if you're going to get it no matter what and you can't fight it?
Yeah.
Do you want to know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was his comment.
His conversation was automatically, it was yes. He was a little fearful when he opened
He said
the
he
results.
wavered on it. He said, when I got mine sequenced, he said, I had to have a conversation with myself about seeing everything that there was in there. Do I really want to see it all? It's telling me my future health.
Mm-hmm.
And do I really want to see that? So pretty cool stuff, though. I mean, that's, sci-fi type movies from 15, 20 years ago, and now it's happening today. So
Yeah.
pretty neat.
And for mostly, I would say inexpensive. I mean, it's expensive, but it's not unreachable for somebody who was really worried about their health.
That's
Think about the kind of money you spend on lots of different things in life, and the cost is only coming down. I mean, as you said, for $4,000, you can have your full sequence done. So what's it going to be in 5 years? $2,000 or whatever. So,
Exactly.
But he said the big part is you got to get it interpreted too. It's just having your DNA means nothing until someone can tell you about it. So that's what was the position he said was?
I can't remember.
No, like it
the
goes to your
that
doctor, but
sequences.
someone has to talk to your doctor.
A geneticist of some
A counselor.
sort.
Genetic counselor, I think was the term.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, how many of those? There's not many around, so it's now it's got to be, someone's got to do the explaining. I mean, this is two different, sciences from just your family doctor to a DNA doctor. I mean, maybe they understand it all really well, but I think that it takes those people, and we have the tests, we have your doctor, and we don't have the person, a lot of people in the middle.
Yeah, and comparing that to something like 23andMe, which is very popular, that is a drop in the bucket compared to what I understand Mikolai and that service can do, which is completely breaking down that genome. So if you don't have an interpreter, you're looking at gibberish. You have no idea what's going on.
No idea what you're staring at.
23andMe, it's just a family disruptor.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat.
It's a roll of the dice.
They can put a lot of stuff in there. I mean, I've done it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you do bump into relatives you might not have known existed, but they're a little far flung. You kind of get to see where the spread of the world came from,
right?
Which is kind of neat.
Really
in some way. So
yeah. So what was the name of the podcast again, Adnan?
The Digital Embrace.
The Digital Embrace.
Yeah.
So if we want to search for that, when do you think you guys might be launching some?
Well, we have our social media and website up. No podcast you can click on just yet, but next month that should change. So digitalembrace.co is the website and the URL, and you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Digital Embrace with an underscore at the end.
Right on. So July, August 2021, we might be seeing podcasts posted.
You'll see episodes posted. Yeah.
Right
You're on the hook now, man.
You're on for it.
Deadline.
I just committed us, Jesse.
Well, thanks for joining us. It was really invigorating talking to you. It's cool to hear about this stuff, and we'll be watching.
Definitely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks for watching this episode of Smokin Bulls. You can find out more about us at smokinbulls.com or follow us on social media.